He made the first anime in history, not to create an art form, not to start a movement that would eventually reach every corner of the planet. He made it to win. This is the story of how one man's plan to make sure nobody could ever compete with him became the single decision that built an entire industry instead. And once you understand what he actually did, you will never watch anime the same way again. In the early 1960s, Japanese television had a problem. Animation existed, but only in short bursts, a few minutes here and there. Nobody believed a full weekly animated series was financially possible. The cost of producing even a few minutes, of hand-drawn animation was staggering. Television networks looked at animation the way most businesses look at an expensive luxury. Interesting in theory, impossible at scale. One man disagreed. His name was Osamu Tezuka. By this point in his career, he was already one of the most successful manga artists in Japan. His comic about a robot boy named Adam had captured the imagination of an entire generation of readers. Tezuka believed that Boy could do more than live on the page. He believed Adam could move. He believed Adam could appear on television every single week in his own animated series. Almost everyone around him thought this was a fantasy. Television executives at Fuji TV had looked at the economics of animation and concluded it simply did not work. A single episode of a live-action drama cost between 450,000 and 600,000 yen to produce. Animation, frame by hand-drawn frame, would cost dramatically more. There was no version of the math that made a weekly animated series profitable. Traditional animation, the kind audiences had seen in theaters for decades, ran at 24 frames per second. Every single second of footage required 24 individual hand-drawn images, each one inked, colored, and photographed in sequence. A single 10-minute theatrical short could take a team of animators months to complete. Stretching that process into a weekly 30-minute broadcast was not just expensive. To the people running Japanese television in 1962, it sounded almost absurd. But Tezuka had spent years studying the work of Walt Disney, and he had developed a theory that nobody else in the room had considered. He believed the cost of animation could be radically reduced if the industry was willing to abandon some of its own assumptions about what animation needed to look like. But Tezuka had an idea, and it was not really about animation at all. It was about strategy. He proposed a number to Fuji TV that stunned everyone in the room: 550,000 yen per episode, roughly the same price as a live-action drama. On the surface, this looked like simple ambition, a passionate creator willing to make his dream happen at any cost. But the real reason behind that number was far more calculated than anyone realized at the time. Tezuka understood something the executives did not. If he could produce a weekly animated series at the price of a live-action show, no other studio in Japan would be able to compete with him. The major animation houses of the era were built around feature films and theatrical shorts, productions designed to take months and command enormous budgets. None of them could realistically match a price point this low. Tezuka was not trying to make animation affordable for the industry. He was trying to make it impossible for anyone else to follow him into it. If the price floor for television animation was set this low, only one company could survive making it: his company, Mushi Production. It was, in essence, an attempt to build a monopoly through price alone. This was not a reckless decision made in the heat of ambition. Tezuka had thought through the mechanics carefully. The major animation studios in Japan at the time, companies with decades of institutional experience and far larger production budgets, simply could not justify entering a market where the price ceiling had been set this low. For them, accepting Tezuka's number would mean operating at a loss on every single project, with no clear way to recover the difference. For Mushi Production, a much smaller and newer studio, the calculation was different. Tezuka was willing to absorb short-term losses in exchange for long-term control of an entire category of entertainment that did not technically exist yet. He would absorb the loss now and dominate the entire television animation landscape for years to come. There was just one problem. 550,000 yen was not enough money to produce a single episode. Not even close. The actual cost of the first episode came to 1,300,000 yen. More than double what Tezuka had promised Fuji TV he could deliver it for. The second episode cost 900,000 yen. Future episodes oscillated between 1 and 2 million yen, consistently and dramatically above the number Tezuka had locked himself into. He was losing money with every single episode of his own show. Most business decisions like this would collapse within weeks, but Tezuka had a plan beyond the broadcast deal itself. He had structured the agreement with Fuji TV so that Mushi Production retained the rights to the actual character and product, the toys, the merchandise, the licensing. Fuji TV could broadcast the show, but they did not own Astro Boy. Tezuka did. So while the broadcasting deal lost money every single week, a second business quietly grew behind it. Action figures appeared in stores, branded candy, comic tie-ins, merchandise that turned a beloved character into a continuous stream of revenue completely separate from the broadcast contract itself. But merchandise alone could not save a production budget this thin. Tezuka also had to solve the actual problem of making the animation itself dramatically cheaper to produce, and the solution he landed on would end up shaping the visual identity of an entire art form. Instead of the traditional 24 frames per second used in theatrical animation, Tezuka cut the frame rate down dramatically. Characters held still for longer stretches. A single mouth movement might be reused across multiple lines of dialogue. Backgrounds were designed to be reused across scenes, rather than redrawn from scratch each time. Dramatic poses replaced fluid motion. A character might simply stand in a striking silhouette for several seconds, rather than move continuously across the frame. Critics at the time and for decades afterward would call this limited animation, a compromise, a workaround born entirely out of financial necessity. But something unexpected happened. The style did not just save money, it created a distinct visual language. The stillness gave weight to dramatic moments. The reused frames forced animators to think more like editors, choosing exactly which images mattered most rather than animating everything continuously. What began as a cost-cutting measure slowly became an aesthetic choice that audiences began to associate with the medium itself. The losses on one side of the business were being absorbed by gains on the other. It was a fragile, complicated, high-stakes balancing act. But on New Year's Day, 1963, it became real. Astro Boy aired for the first time on Fuji television. The response was immediate and overwhelming. At its peak, the show was watched by roughly 40% of the entire Japanese population that had access to a television. It ran for nearly 4 years and 193 episodes, becoming not just a hit, but a cultural phenomenon that defined what an entire generation associated with the future, with science, and with imagination itself. Tezuka's gamble had worked. The show was a triumph. The merchandise revenue offset the broadcast losses just as he had hoped. Mushi Production had pulled off something almost nobody believed was achievable, a sustainable model for weekly television animation, built on a price point designed specifically to keep everyone else out. For a brief moment, his strategy looked flawless. He had built something no one else could replicate, a monopoly secured not through superior animation, not through superior storytelling, but through a price so aggressive that competing with it seemed financially suicidal. Tezuka believed he had locked the door behind him. He was about to discover that the door he built did not just keep others out, it quietly invited them in, because here is the part almost nobody saw coming, and it would take years to fully reveal itself. The very thing Tezuka designed to protect his dominance was about to become the blueprint for an entire industry, to follow him directly into the same arena he thought he had sealed off. Other studios were watching, and what those other studios discovered next would change anime history forever, entirely.